Well, good evening, everyone. It's so nice to have you here with us at the Ridge, reporting for our weekly discussions on the Indigo Girl.
It's been a good week.
It has been a great week. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I don't know. It's been a little bit of a stressful week. We had some, um, one of those home things that happens, like your hot water heater decides to malfunction, and all of a sudden you're waiting for a new one to arrive for
And
a
it seems
few
like it
days.
takes forever. I mean, when you're looking for hot water and you want it now because you're
Yes.
used to it, and then all
Yes.
of a sudden you realize, well, there are people all through Texas, I'm sure, that are looking for hot water
Yeah.
heaters at this point because there's
Yeah.
froze. Trying to get a hot water heater during pandemic times are, yeah, it's just
Well,
been
we
a bit of a
also
challenge.
have
But
a
you
lot of
good.
occupants in the house, which
We
means we
do.
need high occupancy, which is special order and extra days of waiting. But I had a well deserved shower this afternoon after it had been installed. And I have to say, our students were really wonderful. The workers worked really fast because we had to shut the water off for the entire house for this
Yeah,
process.
they're
And
understanding.
everyone has felt these inconveniences, but there's a different level of stress when you've also got a class full of students here. But
It's nice that you have a nice studio and boarding house
right
at
next
the other end
door.
of your drawer,
Yeah.
your driveway here.
Yeah.
So it's
That
been
is
good.
convenient. We didn't
Yeah.
have to make any major modifications.
Yeah.
But this week we're all gathering together. I see people are checking in the comments section, so we're saying hi to everybody. But we're going to discuss chapters 19 through 24.
Yeah, and you know what, Sarah? Again, I can't stress how much I'm enjoying this book.
Yeah.
I just think that Natasha just takes you back and just puts you in the years of 1740
Yeah.
and makes you, first of all, makes me realize how fortunate we are to be living in these times. But they do have, a hard life, but they take time to have a sort of this genteel life
Sure.
where you invite your neighbors to come in, or Mr. Lawrence and his son
To
Henry
entertain.
to entertain them.
Mhm.
But they'd come out not just for an evening and then go home,
Right.
but you're sort of expected to stay for days on end.
Sure. Yeah.
And so in these early chapters, like 19, Mr. Cromwell is there, Ben is there, Ben is getting settled in, and then
After sort of a loose,
yeah.
sort of a loose, maybe you should come by sometime, but come by boat so you don't have to stay.
Exactly. Well, you get the feeling right away that Eliza does
Mhm.
not like Mr. Lawrence or Henry very much, and when she
No.
finds out that dear mother has invited them to stay for days on end
Mhm.
and to take a look, go for strolls around the property.
Survey the property.
Let's see what if she marries
Mhm.
Mr. Lawrence, what is in stall, and does she become his wife, and how he's going to take over the property. It's just
The mom is super cringeworthy for me because I had a completely different experience. But the mom is all about striking the deal. Dad left Eliza in charge of these plantations, and she's taken wholeheartedly the responsibility.
That's right.
But let's face it, mom has nothing else to worry about except for Eliza. And
Polly, and
what a wonderful deal. He gets to acquire some land that he so
Mhm.
desperately desires, and she gets a husband. Win-win, right?
And yet there's that feeling like I'm doing all this work. I'm trying to save our plantations from
Sure.
being overtaken. And yet her brother, her younger brother, George, is now in England getting an
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
And he's expected to join the service.
Yeah.
And then also, when he comes back, he inherits this entire
Estate. Mhm.
that she's worked so hard to keep.
She's such
Yeah.
a good, dutiful sister.
She is. And,
Yeah.
it's just a raw, rotten deal all the way around.
I agree, and sometimes I don't know if I that salt rubs in the wound as a woman a little bit deeper, but I do feel these sort of like pangs of sympathy
Yeah.
for her, because we've all experienced walls that have been put up in front of us. And this week we celebrated women's, recognition.
That's
and all
right.
their contributions that they have done. And, it got me thinking about things, if we could actually go back in time, you do some time traveling, and you could offer up one little bit of information. You can only share one thing with Eliza. Put in the comments, what little ray of sunshine would you share with her to give her hope about what women can experience in the future, because at this point she has no prospects to ever own her own land. She
No.
has no control really over who she marries, let alone holding positions that have any sort of clout in society.
Well, that's just it. I mean, the whole idea that she would be able to vote, I mean, that comes hundreds of years later on.
Well, what is voting? I mean, this is before, they're still
that's
under
true.
a monarchy to somebody who lives on an island on the other side of the world.
That's true.
Yeah. Things are so totally different, and I have to constantly remind myself, one, this is a fiction novel, but also they're so accustomed, it's just part of the routine, like how different she really was to think in these ways that she could manage the farms and do the role that a male would have.
And also within these chapters, we find out a lot about her thinking, about the slaves that they have.
Sure.
And, she's very kind. She doesn't believe in physical punishment. But as she's talking to her, like, social equals, especially the younger ones, Mr. Henry Lawrence, the son of Mr. Lawrence, I mean, he not only can hardly wait to have his own property, and have his own slaves, but he's even thinking that, the Native Americans, we sure hope that these tribes have lots of warfare and sort of kill each other off, and whoever survives, well, we'll just enslave them because they're really hard workers too.
Right, and you could see she had sort of like a sliver of hope for young Henry that maybe he's not so bad, but she very quickly realizes that no matter what, even if she married the lesser of the two, she'd still have Creepo Senior Lawrence as her father-in-law.
That's not exactly
right,
and he's going to be,
it's a lose-lose for her.
It's a lose-lose situation, and she doesn't mind telling her father in a letter, you can forget Mr. Lawrence, that's not going to work.
Well, and it's so blatantly obvious that they know nothing about agriculture. It's more of a business acquisition for them.
Sure.
Because land is the one thing that he doesn't have. His money hasn't bought him yet. And I think that to see someone like that take over the property and mismanage it after she has literally poured her soul into it, beyond every opposition that's come in front of her, I think that's a pretty dismal sort of look into the crystal ball of what her future might look like.
Well, Sarah, do you remember, like, she really gets a very good sort of picture of Mr. Lawrence the Senior.
Yes.
When they're out there and they're looking at the indigo and the process and realize that, it's failing. This one vat is not working well. And Sarah, the slave, who knows quite a bit about indigo, she's
really the only one there at this point who's contributing to the process. She's the only one, and after a lot of convincing, she's the only one that's contributed anything to it. And her Cromwell comes in and basically says, start over.
Yeah.
It's all garbage.
And this Mr. Lawrence, I mean, it's not even his property. It's not even his slave. But he takes it upon himself because he thinks that, she's being rude, and goes and strikes her with his walking cane. And it's so hard that it throws her face down into the soil. Yeah. And Eliza is just completely distraught by the whole situation.
Oh, sure.
Jumps in there, basically attacks
to defend
him,
her,
and pushes that wooden cane across the yard and tells Togo, break it.
Yeah.
And he picks it up and snaps it over his knee.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
you just imagine the whole thing. Like, the whole thing would just be horrifying.
Now, you would not even remember this, but some of our viewers here is going to remember this. There was a television program years ago called Branded, and it was all about sort of like the Civil War times. But it starts out with this soldier having his sword, and like the general snaps that sword over his knee. And
interesting.
Yes.
Was this a PBS series,
It was not. It was just a regular series, sort of like Gunsmoke. And, it's called Branded. But when I read that, I thought, my gosh, it reminds me a lot. But that was...
a 1965 Western, it looks like.
I'm old.
That's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, for those of you who do not remember this, it looks like Branded took place in the 1880s. But, quite the drama, it looks like.
Well, a little bit later on in the chapters too, I love this part of it. the Laurens, I mean, they're just so mad at Eliza. You know, there is absolutely no chance that there is ever going
Well,
to
they've
be
been humiliated,
humiliated.
right?
That's
And there's
right.
been no one to witness it. I mean, he's literally looking around for anyone to witness these horrible, horrible acts.
But he's very good at making stories up. And
Sure,
he's going to
yeah.
go back to Charleston and he's going to just fabricate these stories about how well he's been mistreated
Yeah.
and this
That's
young
her only
whippersnapper.
only saving grace, though, is that people know him to be an embellisher, and she can only hope that the socialites in town will take it with a grain of salt and form their own opinions.
And I got a feeling they probably did that,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they go back to town, and then mother comes into the study. Eliza's sitting there, and she's doing the
Hmm.
ledgers, and her mother comes in, and she goes, you know, Natasha writes the story like, oh, well, she clenches her fingers together and puts them in her
Yeah.
dress. And it's like, okay, I'm going to brace myself. I'm going to get an
Yes.
earful.
Yes. Yeah.
And her mother is more concerned what people are going to say about Ben. And what is your interest in this young Negro man?
Right.
What is your interest? Says nothing about the Laurens in
Wow.
that moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, and
That's
then
the
turns
way
on her heels and walks away.
the mom for me, she goes back and forth between it's just, oh man, I'm waiting for her to be written out of the story versus man,
Yeah.
she does understand, and she ultimately has her daughter's best interest at mind. She doesn't
Mhm.
want her to be married off to somebody who's abusive or somebody who is not going to be kind to her, but certainly it was a social setback. She would have preferred it would have been handled differently,
Mhm.
but without
Yeah.
any other options, that was,
Well, it's
mom seems more eager to just jump at whoever will pay
Mm.
interest than the best suitor.
It's amazing what parents see. You know, I can remember your mom and I looking at you and seeing, the twinkle in your eye about a certain Mr. Dustin Bixler. And we'd say, what do you think? What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
Your mom would say, yeah, maybe this is the
Maybe.
one. This is the
Maybe.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Mhm.
her mother sees that in Ben and is like, oh my gosh, there's a black man from, that's going to work on here. And
Yeah.
she is in love with him.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I have to tell you, it's probably for her very transparent because she's known Ben since he was a child. Like, she understands his mannerisms. She understands the long gazes across the field, the unnecessary
Yeah.
closeness. I mean, she certainly does not spend or give any other slave on the property the same amount of
Oh,
attention.
no.
I mean, she cares for many of them. Quash, she spends an incredible amount of time with, but not in an intimate manner, working side by side in the field as they are. But
Yeah.
there's a comfort for anybody who's ever had a best friend. You know that there are certain people in your lives where they can be gone for many years at a time, but as soon as they return or you have a chance to even be in the same room as them, it's like
You just pick up.
you open the book right up where you left
Yeah.
it paged off. But I don't know. She's definitely seen differences, though, in that relationship. He's much more distanced. The relationship is
Oh
building
yeah,
with
they don't have
Sarah.
that same sort of, friendship that they had when they were children, where they
Yeah.
could talk about anything.
Hmm.
He now realizes, okay, this is now my place. This
Yeah.
is my job to help you grow Indigo,
Mhm.
and
We're not friends anymore.
we're not friends anymore.
You're
It's
yeah.
different.
You hired my owner.
Correct.
Which is a very weird adult relationship to have now, compared to the carefree life that they had
Right.
as children. Where in Antigua, certainly there were race divisions, but because they were so isolated, it was not the same pressures of in colonial America.
That's true.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. But you sort of feel that tension too. I think there's a little bit of jealousy
sure.
because they have put Ben in a cabin that was
Mhm.
constructed for his comfort, but
Sure.
also right next door is where Sarah can
Sarah's, yeah.
live and her children, and they share a common central chimney between these
Mhm.
two cabins, so they're very, very close. And
Mhm.
she sort of walks in at some point where Sarah is coming out
A
of
very awkward morning.
Yes.
What we might
Mhm.
call in the modern day the walk of shame, right? The evening
Yeah.
walk of shame.
And she can't possibly question any of this. It's none of her
No.
business, she
No.
says.
And you ever noticed in the story when it's brought up or breached, there's never any like a gasp, even from her mother, like, oh, "What do you mean?"
No, right.
Because remember, we talked about this last week. There was never any opportunity for them to sort of gain the same Christian values, or have an opportunity to wed. So children out of wedlock were a very
Common
commonplace thing.
But I think she felt a little bit of jealousy.
Sure,
Yeah,
that
Sarah's
would
coming out,
sting.
and yeah,
At the very least, I think the sting may have come from the fact that she didn't know. This is supposed to be her best friend who told her everything, and how could she not know that this was going on?
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's well educated. He even brings that finally, like towards the ends of our chapters. He's bringing this up about, hey, when we were children, you knew how to read and write,
Yeah.
and you used to teach me my alphabet, and I learned how to read because of you. And now, why have you not done the same thing to my friend Quash? And what about the children on
Sure.
why do you not want to teach them? He's not seeing ahead that, well, they could now read and write, and they could write letters to each other and start a rebellion against the plantation owners.
Well, and that's the thing. That's a weak excuse. She can't possibly use that at this point, because the Negro Act that we discussed last week, which was in response to the revolt at Stone Oak, that happened, in a very close proximity to the time period we're talking about. He's talking about, before I got here, why weren't you doing any of this? What was so different about me versus what? And I mean, we all can see it from the outside. We see that times were different. She was a child and she was just learning to read herself. It's sort of like, oh, I just learned how to blow a bubble with my bubble gum. Let me teach my friend how to do this too.
Exactly. Yeah,
it was very innocent. There was never any pressures. And certainly when her father was there, it was not one of the programs that he set up for his slaves.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, I could see how she could have easily just sort of tailed into it. But, talking about the Negro Act, there was clearly defined areas where they said you cannot teach your slaves to write. Do you remember that?
I do.
And that's really important as we sort of transition into the next chapters. She has learned that there's little loops around in it, and she's going to start considering some of the legalities of it.
Sure. And she, again, she loves going to the Pinckneys. I mean, they've become very, very good friends. And, in the last chapter in 24, Mr. Pinckney sort of says, Eliza, Mrs. Pinckney thinks the world of you. She has the utmost respect for you.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Because you're 16 years old and you've taken on all this responsibility for your family, and she just thinks the world of you, as well as I do.
Yes.
And so you sort of get that closeness. He insists, call me Charles, please. We're not, we're friends at this point.
Sure.
And how can I help you out? And she thinks, you can help me better understand this Negro Act, because I have been here, who is the, working.
Yeah, I like how
Mr.
she approaches that. Like, I know this guy, but I know him from a long time ago, and basically the Negro Act was written as such that you couldn't import slaves. And so she is wondering if she's in some sort of breach of contract, having an outside contractor on the farm who has brought his own slaves. And he said, it's so loosely written, even if they were yours, I don't think that they would have a leg to stand on. So she was safe in there. But she's smart. She's not just dismissing it because she knows that there's a lot at stake, including fines. And now that the properties are mortgaged, she has a lot to lose.
A lot to lose.
And she's 17. Let's keep revisiting that she is 17.
Just a child, really, at this point. And she's taken a lot on. But, she's much older for her years.
The whole time you were talking about her bunking Sarah up and, having the Lawrences there, she's making these real accommodations for these folks and building new cabins and putting, med suites in. And I keep thinking she's 17. And, most college kids are hard pressed in their early 20s to have their parents stay for one night. It usually looks like a futon and a whole bunch of extra pillows.
That's right.
And here she's totally got her act together as a grown woman.
Yeah. And she knows how to entertain people.
She does know how to entertain people. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing, as the harvest is coming along and they start considering and having discussions about the seeds, we're getting seed pods. We need to start considering saving some of them back. they start having discussions with Cromwell about what's the best way to go about this. You're supposed to be the expert here. And I think this is one of the first times where she starts seeing some conflicting ideas between Ben and also Mr.
Mr.
Cromwell,
Cromwell.
because Ben has some ideas, of which are, instead of collecting them and drying them, he recommends that,
Just sort of shaking them on the soil.
yeah, let them go into the soil and we'll collect them so that they have a chance to sort of connect with the new place that they're in.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Did you find it interesting, Sarah, with the one part toward the end of our chapters where Ben finally sort of opens up and wants to have one-on-one discussion? I mean, he's been so quiet,
Mm-hmm.
and then he turns around and goes, "Hey, what's your interest in Indigo? What's the big deal? Why do you
Mhm.
want to do this?
Yeah.
And what's my part in this?
Yeah.
And what am I going to get out of it?
Right.
Oh, you want to grow indigo and you want to be rich and you want to also save your property.
Right.
But what is it for me? And
Mhm.
as far as that goes, what about Cromwell? What is he getting out of this?
Well, he's getting paid as a contractor.
Right. But
But
for Ben, is he going to actually get his freedom for
I
being
think
such
that
a good
I think that Eliza
servant?
is very much, I don't think she's sort of realized it yet, but he's a very valuable asset. I don't know that any man, unless they were of some superior mortal standing, would be quick to let somebody that valuable go. He has a unique knowledge that clearly Cromwell has not obtained himself.
Yeah.
And so to just sort of grant him his freedom, regardless if there's a contract in place, I don't see that on the next horizon.
No, clearly Ben is the one, and
Mhm.
Cromwell was just basically the vehicle
Sure.
to get him here,
Yeah.
so he could do his job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so well written,
Yeah.
and
It is, and Ben does a really good job at sort of like interweaving himself into this already very well established community there. When there's no conflict between he and Quash. There's no
oh no,
um
they've become really
yeah,
good
Togo.
friends.
Yeah, they're all very supportive with each other.
And Ben wants them to be able to read and write as
For
well.
sure, for
So,
sure.
and I think actually Eliza does too, and that's
Yeah.
why she's trying to work with Mr.
Yeah.
Pinckney to get them.
Well, and who
around
knows? It
that.
may not have ever come to her attention in that way unless Ben said something. And he is in a unique position as a former friend
Mhm.
to say something so boldly without any sort of physical or abusive repercussions of being that forthright and sort of,
Yeah, and for Eliza too. Again, and part some things just stick out at me, and it
Yeah.
makes me think.
Mhm.
She wants to ask him so many things, and one of the things is like, what's your life been like?
Yeah.
How's your grandmother? I so enjoyed her when we were children. Your grandmother was just the nicest lady. How
Yeah.
is she? And then she goes, I can't ask him that.
Right.
My gosh, he was sold off as a slave. He may have never seen his grandmother again. Is she alive?
Yeah, it's almost insensitive
It's so
for her to say,
insensitive.
"Hey," I
Right.
just realized like how relaxed we were getting in our chairs here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little insensitive for her to say because we talked about this last week with children and partners that it was not uncommon for folks to be separated, and in this case, they crossed oceans.
Right.
And this is a temporary position at this point because unless he's freed, he'll be going right back to Antigua
Right.
with Cromwell.
Right.
And so at this point, we're not really sure what to expect.
Well, maybe somewhere in the future chapters,
Yeah.
we're going to be able to keep Ben here. Maybe there'll be some money exchanged and he'll just stay here.
That would be fantastic.
I hope so.
I have one more question for you guys about that, but we talked a couple weeks ago about Eliza, and if this were turned into a movie, who would we choose for the main character of Eliza to be played by? But now that discussion has been breached, every time I read this book, I start thinking about different characters and who they would be played by. And as Charles Pinckney's character continues to develop, I'm wondering if any of you are also starting to consider who his part would be played by. Do you have a choice? He's such a complex character,
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Maybe I'll let you guys throw that in the comments section. We'll think about that. Who would
Has anybody thrown in about Eliza, who should play Eliza?
We haven't put in, well, there is in the previous videos, they did put discussions down as to who, and some of them were really interesting choices. One of them, I think, that Andrea Thiessen put in was Emma from Harry Potter. What is her last name?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, although I did just hear that she officially announced her retirement from acting. She
Oh,
thinks that
my.
she's made plenty of money.
She most likely
She's
has.
retiring in her 20s. So
That's it.
if you have any, Kevin Costner, that's a good
That's a good one.
suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure at this point. I think there was discussions early on where we were trying to estimate his age, and they said he was probably about twice her age, which that would have put him at 32 years old.
Yeah.
So we might be looking at a much younger man. Yeah. Andrea says, just funny. The old lawmakers couldn't figure out if he could read or pretty much write. That's absolutely true. And, she says something interesting later in discussions, like it's hard not to learn one without learning the other.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, Chris Evans that played Captain America. That's a very handsome choice, Miriam. Appreciate that one.
Yeah.
So as we sort of wrap up our discussions, let's talk about next week. Wednesday's book club is going to be sort of a tight one for us. But we're going to try and squeeze everything in. For anybody who knows our family, Windsor has chosen as her sport of choice Irish dancing, and next week is the equivalent of the Irish dance March Madness. So we will be going to 3 different performances before book club. So bear with me if I look a little off the bench. But we're gonna cheer her on. This is our first time we actually get to go out in public spaces under a tent out in the parking lot, and we're looking forward to it. So
you know what? That is wonderful. It seems like things here at the Ridge and also at the Glen are starting to feel a little bit more normal for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it is the 60-degree weather.
It could
but
be.
We are so fortunate. We have 5 students this week who are in-house, and they're enjoying being outside. You and Dustin got the picnic tables back out on the patio.
Oh,
so we can
60
have
degrees on the patio.
God,
it was
wonderful.
so nice.
But they're enjoying the walking trails.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling adventurous and safe, please come out and visit us. We'd love to see you. And
we would.
And
call ahead, see what's going on here for the day.
And Sarah and Annie have actually moved the entire shop around. You've got to come see this because it is fantastic. I have not had a chance to say to you how much I enjoy it, but it seems like there are threads and colors and things of and types of yarns I see in a totally different light. And it's inspiring. So way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Sometimes you just need a little bit of a mix-up, so we're doing some rearranging in the store. And I don't know, I just had a little bit of spring fever, and we decided to jump into it.
Open the door, open the windows, and move things around. You've got some new crabapple yarns came in.
New crabapple, If any of you received your last issue of Handwoven Magazine, there was a feature on crabapple's variegated pearl cotton. They did a special colorway for this issue, so we do have some of that in the store. What I'll do quickly is pull it up in the chat section later, and either that or you can just give Annie a call on the phone and she'll get you some. All right. Well, we've had a joyful evening this evening.
Thanks so much for joining us again. I look down on this screen and I see a lot of our friends from all over the country. So, we love having you.
We do. It is so fun. So next week we'll be discussing chapters 25 through 32, which there's some Indigo coming along.
Oh, boy.
There's some Indigo coming
I hate to read ahead, and yet I want to read ahead. But, I think that's what I'll be doing on Saturday afternoon. Yeah, it's supposed to be chilly again.
Have a wonderful rest of your week. If for anybody's going out and getting COVID shots this week, good luck.
Got mine.
Congratulations. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Take care. Good night.